There was a question that was asked last week. If you remember, as we were discussing the resurrection, there was someone in the chat who was asking a bunch of questions, and I answered a bunch of them, but they were asking a bunch more. There's one in particular that I didn't mean to, but I kind of blew past, and I think we need to address it. It has to do with science. And given the topic of this lesson, I thought it was relevant, because we just saw the rise of the scientific revolution and scientific method and people's thinking along those lines, right? And it's science. Okay, so the question is about science. And here's the question they asked. Science, or that was a statement, because I made the charge that science is not the only way to discover truth. And this was their comment, which I think needs a response. They said, science is the most reliable method we have to come to knowledge. It is clearly not the only way, but it is the most reliable. Most reliable way to come to knowledge about what exactly? Because you have to ask yourself that question, right? Science is the most reliable way to get at knowledge. Knowledge about what? See, science is not, it is a reliable method, right? But there's things that science cannot get at, right? Science is wonderful. If you're wanting to know the orbit of some planets, if you're wanting to know, meteorological cycles so the weatherman can tell you what the forecast is going to be, if you want to develop some technology like cell phones and, hey, this wonderful internet thing that we got going on here, awesome. Science is fantastic to discover knowledge about that sort of thing, about the way the physical world and natural world functions and the order that God has created. That's what science is fantastic at getting at. But there's things that it cannot get at. One of which is science cannot address logic. It cannot address issues of logical and mathematical truths. Those are not scientific. They're not something that science can even begin to address. Actually, logic and math have to be assumed in order for science to even function. So you can't examine logic and math with science. You cannot find out mathematical truths scientifically. It's the wrong tool. Metaphysical truths. Science has no ability to discover metaphysical truths. There's certain things that you have to believe and accept about the world that science has zero ability to take part in. For instance, does the world outside of your mind really exist? I remember being asked this question in philosophy. I had a professor who loved to ask odd questions. And he said there's people who actually would believe these kind of things, where whenever you leave a room, does the room still exist? See, science can't answer that for you, right? Do other people exist, or are they all in your mind and you're the only one exists? Did the past really happen? Or did it just get created 5 minutes ago with the appearance that it happened? Right? These are metaphysical truths that you have to just take. You have to accept that they are as they seem. Science cannot answer these things for you. Ethical beliefs. Science cannot tell you right or wrong. Right? Science can tell you how Jesus died on the cross. It cannot tell you if crucifixion is immoral or not. Science can not tell you whether or not the Holocaust was evil, or whether or not giving to the poor is noble. Science cannot answer those things. Aesthetic judgments. Beauty. Science has nothing to say on the issue of beauty. Historical truths. Science, there's some data points that it can give, some information for consideration, but science has no access to the past to observe it and test it and control it. Science cannot study the past. You need a different method. Historians do not use the scientific method. They use the historical method. Science itself cannot be proven scientifically. You get into a circular reasoning. That's one thing we were saying last week that I tried to mention, that bad thinking is what's called scientism. The idea that only science can give you answers falls completely on its face because science itself cannot give you that answer. But here's the thing, I'm not trying to knock on science. Science is good for what it's good for, but it's not a tool for every kind of knowledge. It cannot be the most reliable resource and method for gaining knowledge. All these other things, it can't even enter the conversation. It is the wrong tool. Science doesn't even get a seat at the table of some of these things. So it's far from the best method. But it's a good method for what it's good for. But trying to use science to figure out philosophical, metaphysical, moral, historical type things is like trying to use a metal detector to find plastic under the sand. It's not going to work. I don't care how good your metal detector is. It's the wrong tool for the job. And so that is my response to the idea that science is the most reliable method for discovering truth. Not by a long shot. It's really good for what it's good for, but it is woefully ill-equipped for a variety of other things.